The Galactic Coalition's high command watched the human footage with amused disbelief. A dozen species gathered around the hologram, their luminous eyes reflecting the image of a man in snow camouflage, braced behind a rifle that spat fire and lead. One admiral clicked his mandibles in laughter. Chemical explosions for propulsion? Barbaric. Another hissed. Their weapons pollute the air. Their projectiles move slower than sound. They call this war. They mocked the recoil, the clumsy magazines, the frozen breath escaping from human lips. To them, humanity's methods were relics, unrefined and obsolete. When the order came to invade Earth's polar wastelands, no one objected. The frozen continents were uninhabited, they thought, and the data buried beneath the ice was valuable. Old navigational records, pre-FTL human archives. A small strike force descended, armed with plasma rifles and hovercraft designed for cold suppression. The air shimmered with their heat signatures as they landed among ridges of blue-white snow. Their commanders laughed at the quaint notion that anyone could survive here. The first patrol vanished within an hour. The blizzard swallowed their comms, and their locator beacons fell silent. Drones sent to investigate transmitted fragments, flashes of static, then stillness. The snow seemed to close over their footprints, as if the Earth itself conspired to hide them. The Coalition dismissed it as interference. Magnetic distortion, said one technician. Primitive planet, said another. They didn't understand the small brass casings found beside the wreckage of their probe. Miles away, a man lay prone beneath a camouflaged shroud of snow. The breath from his lungs froze against his beard and fell as tiny flakes. His rifle rested on a bipod, its barrel swaddled in frost tape, its optics clear and patient. He did not shiver. He watched the valley through a scope that magnified motionless trees, drifting powder, and the faint shimmer of alien energy fields. His name no longer mattered. What mattered was the oath he'd taken long before the world fell quiet, to hold this line until he could not hold it anymore. He had learned long ago that technology does not win wars. Endurance does. Machines fail. Batteries die. Plasma freezes solid in polar cold. But steel and powder, maintained by steady hands, endure. He had become part of the snow, his camouflage perfect, his stillness absolute. He sipped melted ice from a tube inside his mask, adjusted windage by instinct, and listened to the thin cry of distant wind. Through his scope, he saw them, tall figures in reflective armor, their weapons glowing faintly blue, heads turning in confusion. They moved without urgency, confident in superiority. The man adjusted his aim, feeling the minute resistance of the trigger under a gloved finger. He remembered the last transmission from command: evacuate the research facility, destroy everything of value. He had agreed to stay behind. It wasn't bravery. It was necessity. Someone had to make the Coalition doubt this planet's submission. The shot broke the mountain silence like a whip crack. The recoil pressed gently against his shoulder. A puff of vapor curled from the muzzle before frost claimed it. Through the scope, he watched the lead alien collapse backward, a fist-sized hole torn through armor and pride alike. The rest froze in shock. Their shields, built for plasma dispersal, had not even registered the projectile. He chambered another round and waited. They scattered, shouting in their shrill alien tongue, searching for a weapon signature that didn't exist. Only the wind answered them. Beneath his shroud, the man allowed himself a slow exhale. The first move was his, but the war was just beginning. Far above, the Coalition's ships orbited in silence, unaware that one human with a primitive rifle had just declared that Earth would not be taken quietly. The aliens adapted quickly, or thought they did. After losing 3 patrols, the Coalition deployed spectral scanners across the valley, mapping heat, energy, and electromagnetic traces. Their readings returned nothing but static. They had expected a swarm of defenders, drones perhaps, not devoid of a single man who left no signal to follow. They recalibrated their sensors again and again, refusing to believe that silence itself was their enemy. Above them, satellites searched for weapon discharges and found none. The human's rifle burned no plasma, emitted no signature. To their logic-driven minds, he did not exist. Beneath a ridge glazed in ice, the sniper cleaned his weapon with meticulous care. Every motion was slow, deliberate, conserving warmth. He had learned to respect the cold. It punished haste. He melted snow in a steel cup over a chemical warmer, then poured the liquid into a canteen. His fingers, though stiff, moved with practiced precision. The wind howled outside the crevice like a living thing, but inside was stillness, almost peace. He checked the rounds lined neatly beside him. 38 left. Each one had a count. He remembered the first week after the evacuation. Command's voice had faded from the comms, replaced by white noise. He had made a choice to remain when others fled. The coalition's arrival was inevitable, and someone had to ensure they gained nothing of value. Now, days or weeks later, he wasn't sure how long he'd been fighting. The cold blurred time, turning minutes into hours, hours into dreams of warmth that never came. The aliens grew fearful. They sent ground teams with drones that buzzed like insects, their lenses sweeping over snowdrifts. When they found empty shell casings and perfect circular holes through armor, they held meetings in hushed confusion. Some argued the humans had master cloaking. Others believed the planet itself was haunted, that Earth retaliated through unseen spirits. In truth, the sniper simply understood patience. He moved less than a meter a day, shifting his vantage between natural depressions, using snow and terrain as armor. He watched them study the battlefield with their luminous devices. He could almost admire their effort, their arrogance softened by fear. One alien officer paused near a shattered ice ridge, scanning the bullet embedded in a frozen wall. The man watched through his scope, motionless, heart steady. He didn't fire. Not yet. Every shot carried a message, and not all messages required sound. Sometimes the best weapon was dread. When the sun briefly crested the horizon, it painted the mountains in ghostly light. He allowed himself a moment to remember warmth, family, laughter, the hum of an engine before a long mission. It was a dangerous indulgence. Sentiment dulled focus. He forced it down and checked his instruments again. The temperature had dropped another 5 degrees. Even the aliens' machines would start to fail soon. He smiled faintly beneath the frost on his beard. The cold was his ally. That night, a squad ventured too close. He saw them through a veil of drifting snow, their outlines blurred, their formation sloppy with tension. He waited until one paused to inspect the ground, then squeezed the trigger. The shot struck true, silent thunder across the ridge. The others panicked, firing blindly into the storm. Plasma bolts hissed, illuminating the snowfall in eerie blue flashes. When the light faded, only echoes remained. He listened for pursuit, but none came. The aliens would retreat again, whispering of ghosts. They still didn't understand that there was no army, only one man, one rifle, and well older than their empire. He rested his cheek against the stock, breath misting softly. The wind carried the sound of engines from the distance. New arrivals, heavier, slower. Reinforcements. He opened his eyes to the darkness and whispered to the cold, "Let them come." The coalition arrived at dawn with a confidence that looked brittle in the pale light. Their reinforcements trudged through the snow in towering walkers, machines whose joints exhaled steam and whose armored plates crackled with protective fields. A fleet of skimmers hovered overhead, slicing through the cold air in tight formation. The aliens believed mass firepower would flush out whatever phantom had haunted their troops. They expected a hidden bunker, an entrenched squad, perhaps an automated defense grid. They never imagined the truth, that a single human, half frozen and exhausted, had orchestrated their humiliation. The sniper lay camouflaged on a cliffside, his body flattened against the snow, every breath measured. The relentless cold gnawed at his joints, but he ignored it. Pain was familiar, almost comforting, a reminder he was still alive. He studied the enemy through his scope, noting patterns. The walkers moved with slow, ponderous rhythm. The skimmers drifted in cautious arcs, Infantry clustered near sensor pylons, expecting ambushes defined by technology rather than terrain. Their assumptions made them predictable. Predictability was fatal. Below, the walkers began clearing a path by firing bursts of plasma into the drifts, vaporizing ice and exposing jagged rock. The shock waves rippled through the valley. The sniper waited, watching snow loosen along a precarious ridge. Nature itself was a weapon here, if used with care. He reached for a small detonator in his pack, an old charge left from the station's evacuation. Everything he carried was outdated by coalition standards, but that was what made it effective. Old tools had no digital signature. They simply worked. He placed a gloved thumb on the trigger, exhaled slowly, and sent a charge erupting beneath the weakened slope. The mountain answered with a roar as snow and rock cascaded downward, slamming into the lead walker. The towering machine stumbled, toppled, and vanished under the avalanche. Panic erupted among the alien soldiers. They fired wildly into the sliding mass, their blasts melting holes that only fueled the surge. The valley became a fury of white and thunder. Using the chaos, the sniper slipped from his perch and moved to a secondary position marked only by instinct and memory. Years of training had taught him to navigate terrain like a shadow. Every step was precise, every pause intentional. He slid into a narrow crevice, steadied his rifle on a natural ledge, and sighted the nearest skimmer. Its pilot scanned frantically for heat signatures, unaware that the cold masked his completely. He adjusted for wind, distance, and the machine's erratic movement. Then he fired. The bullet struck the skimmer's stabilizer. The craft lurched sideways, collided with a pine weighed down by frost, and detonated in a muted bloom of flame. The explosion illuminated the fractured valley, revealing the coalition's disarray. Soldiers scrambled to regroup, their discipline unraveling under the invisible assault. The sniper's pulse remained calm. Each strike was controlled, necessary, chosen not to destroy them all but to delay them. Delay was victory. Yet he could feel fatigue creeping deeper, a numbing heaviness settling in a bone. He flexed his fingers, willing warmth to return. He could not afford hesitation. The coalition would eventually adjust. They always did. Their commanders were already barking orders, forcing troops into tighter formations, attempting to corral the threat they couldn't see. He watched them reorient toward the distant facility buried beneath ice. They were close, too close. He had bought time, but not enough. The next hours would demand everything he had left. He checked his remaining ammunition, noting the dwindling count with grim acceptance. Survival no longer mattered. Only the mission did. As dusk bled across the mountains, he settled into position once more. The aliens advanced cautiously, their fear palpable even from afar. He steadied his breath, aligned his scope with the lead officer, and prepared for the night's brutal work. The cold deepened, the valley darkened, and the war tightened around him like a fist. The coalition advanced through the dying light with grim determination. Their formations tightened into a wedge of shield drones and armored infantry. The valley glowed with the soft pulse of their protective fields, a shimmering wall designed to deflect kinetic projectiles. Behind them marched the elite strike team, soldiers bred for precision, conditioned to withstand fear, and armed with technology the rest of the galaxy considered unstoppable. Yet even they moved with hesitation, aware that every shadow might conceal the unseen marksman who had shattered their confidence. They no longer mocked human weapons. They feared them. The sniper observed from a windswept ridge, breath shallow beneath layers of frost. His joints ached with a dull, persistent throb, but he forced his body to obey. Each movement felt borrowed, as if the cold were repossessing strength he'd once owned. He studied the enemy's approach, noting the drone's orbiting pattern and the steady hum of an armored generator carried by the commanding officer. That generator powered the shields that made the strike team nearly impervious. If it remained intact, nothing he carried could stop their advance. His rifle, loyal and scarred, lay chilled against his chest, metal crackling faintly as temperatures dropped. He whispered a steadying breath and calculated the distance. 2 kilometers. Wind uncertain. Light fading. His scope trembled once before he locked his muscles still. This shot demanded perfection. It also demanded sacrifice. The cold had begun fusing the rifle's internal components. Another high-pressure round could fracture the bolt. He weighed the risk and dismissed it. Mission first. Always first. Below, the aliens pressed closer to the buried facility, the ancient research station's outline barely visible beneath layers of ice. The sniper envisioned what would happen if they reached it. The Coalition unlocking technologies humans had sealed away for a reason, transforming the galaxy into a battlefield dominated by a single empire. He had no illusions about saving Earth entirely, but denying this one victory mattered. Even a solitary act of defiance could redirect the path of a war. He aligned the reticle with the commander's generator pack. The device glowed faintly, radiating confidence the wearer no longer felt. Snowflakes drifted across his vision like ghostly interference. He exhaled, slow and absolute, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked hard, metal shrieking as a crack burst along its frame. The shot soared through the frozen air, carving a silent path across the valley. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the generator erupted in a flash of white fire. Shields flickered out like dying stars, leaving the elite troops exposed. A ripple of shock traveled through their ranks, too late for them to act on it. A wall of detonations followed as the mines the sniper had planted days earlier activated, triggered by the sudden drop in shielding. Explosions tore through the ice, sending shockwaves reverberating through the mountains. The earth groaned, ancient and unforgiving. Snow shifted, then thundered down in a roaring cascade as an avalanche swept across the valley, engulfing aliens and machinery alike. The sniper had only seconds to appreciate the devastation before the ridge beneath him gave way. Snow surged around him in a crushing embrace, pulling him into darkness. He felt neither fear nor regret. He had known this end was possible from the first shot he fired. His thoughts drifted briefly to the warmth he once knew, the world he hoped might endure despite everything. Then the cold claimed him. Silence returned to the mountains. Hours later, the surviving Coalition forces retreated, shaken beyond doctrine, reporting that Earth housed warriors capable of annihilating entire battalions alone. Their commanders debated whether further incursions were worth the cost. Rumors spread across the galaxy of a human ghost who fought with metal and willpower stronger than any energy field. Days afterward, a human recovery team arrived. They found the valley transformed into a frozen graveyard of alien steel. Beneath the snow, they discovered remnants of a rifle, shattered but resolute, and nearby, the still form of the sniper who had rewritten the Coalition's assumptions. They lifted him with quiet reverence, understanding that some victories were measured not by survival, but by defiance. Humanity, underestimated and relentless, had spoken through one man's final shot.